The year was 2001, and I was at EB Games. I was particularly excited this day because my parents had brought my brothers and I there to purchase Microsoft's new video game console, the Xbox. As my parents spoke to the man behind the counter about this new game system, my mother turned to my two brothers and I and told us each to go pick out one game that they would then purchase alongside the Xbox. Filled with excitement, we all dashed away to the Xbox game section further back into the store. My eyes quickly dashed between all the different game cases, each with their distinct green X. My eldest brother grabbed a game with a football player on it, and my younger brother reached for a game I thought at the time looked kind of like Tekken. So many different games, but which one was the right one for me? A game with what looked like a green space soldier of some kind stared back at me. I picked up the game case and read the title, Halo. I turned it over and read, "You are the last of your kind, bred for combat, built for war. You are the master of any weapon, the pilot of any vehicle. In fear, no enemy." Wow, that sounds incredible, my 9-year-old brain thought. But then, my eyes locked onto the bold M at the bottom of the case. Oh no, I wasn't allowed to play games that were rated mature. Maybe this one time my mom and dad would say yes. As I rejoined my family at the front of the store, I showed my dad the case. I knew he would be my ticket into playing this awesome looking game if he too found it interesting. My dad said something along the lines of, "That looks cool," and set it down on the counter beside the two other games that my brothers had chosen. As the man behind the counter began to ring up everything on the counter, he paused for a moment and looked to my mother and said, "Ma'am, just to be sure you are aware, this game is rated mature for blood and gore violence." He then looked directly at me. My mom then picked up the game case and saw the pictures of a spaceman shooting aliens and flying spaceships. Since the violence appeared to be from fighting aliens, my mother seemed okay with it, but added that my father would have to play a little bit of the game first without me before I would be allowed to play it, just to be sure it wasn't anything too bad. My mom gave the game back to the employee and he rang it up. From that moment on, my life would forever change as I would proceed to play the greatest video game young me ever knew. I beat that game playing co-op with my dad, with my brothers, with my friends, by myself, even a few times with my mom. Me, my brothers, and my dad would play the versus mode almost nightly. Our neighborhood friends would come over and play the multiplayer. This game changed what gaming meant to me. It made an impact so deep on me that 20 years later, I would be creating this video reviewing every single campaign level in it, and giving each one an individual score from 1 to 10 based on my experiences and love or dislike for them. And at the end of the video, we'll add up all the level scores into one combined score that we can then use to gauge and compare to the rest of the Halo games in the franchise. At the end, I will finally know which Halo's campaign is my all-time favorite. Since its launch, I've always considered Halo 2 to be my all-time favorite, so I'll be excited to see if that ends up holding true in the end. My name is Casey, and welcome to my review of every level in Halo Combat Evolved's campaign. Cortana, all I need to know is did we lose them? The iconic first line that started it all. Both Halo as a franchise and the first of 10 levels in Combat Evolved. The Pillar of Autumn. Also, I love how the very first shot of the entire game is of the actual Halo Installation 04 ring. In fact, this whole opening cinematic is just excellent storytelling right from the get-go. Through organic conversation, we learn that this ship that we are now on was fleeing the devastation of its home world, a colony world known to the player only as Reach. We also learn that whoever or whatever is chasing us is not only way faster than we are, but extremely deadly, and they would be all over us in just a few minutes. After seeing Johnson in all of his CE glory give a pep talk to the Marines, we finally pan over to the cryo chamber, where the man, the myth, the freaking legend himself is finally revealed. The hatches blow off the cryopod, and the Master Chief steps out. What follows is a brief controls tutorial, and then we're off to find the captain and get the hell off this ship. The rest of the Pillar of Autumn works as almost an entire tutorial, keeping the player in small closed-off spaces and hallways, as it introduces how the motion tracker works, that hitting enemies from behind is almost always a guaranteed insta-kill, how to use your flashlight, and even how to throw grenades. Most of the time, levels like this in other games would feel very on the rails, possibly even frustrating. Yet each of these learning moments is presented to the player in a fairly organic way and without limiting the experience too much. And while the Pillar of Autumn isn't a particularly challenging level, even on Legendary, I do think it sets up the rest of the game absolutely perfectly. I remember as a kid just absolutely being floored by the whole experience though, looking out the windows and seeing the alien covenant blasting away at the hull of the ship and forcing their transport pods into the human escape pod bays to further their boarding action. I had never seen anything quite like it before at the time, and it was incredibly exciting. Sure, these days the novelty has worn off just a little bit, and some of the lore presented in this level doesn't quite fit in anymore, or has been altered, such as the name of the second chapter in the level calling the Master Chief a cyborg. I mean, I guess that could be kind of accurate, though if I'm not mistaken, I think Halo CE might be the only piece of Halo media to call the Chief that. As we all know, it was later changed to just referring to the Master Chief as a Spartan or super soldier, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. Ultimately, the first level, the Pillar of Autumn, sets up the rest of the game perfectly in my opinion, even if it is a rather linear and simple level. Now, as I grade each of these levels and give them a score of 1 to 10, please keep in mind I will be grading these missions on a bit of a curve. So if I were to give a level a 3 out of 10, it wouldn't mean that I hate the level per se, or even that I think it's a terrible level. It's just not the best that Halo has to offer. In fact, I think there's very few levels across all of Halo that are just downright bad. But don't worry, when we get to them, I'll let you know. With all that being said, my final score for the Pillar of Autumn is a 7 out of 10. I think it does everything that it needed to do to teach the player the fundamentals of Halo, while also putting forth an extremely interesting plot that makes the player need to know more. One side note, when I was a kid, this particular cinematic at the end of the Pillar of Autumn always confused me. I never was able to understand the perspective, and I was never quite sure what I was looking at. It took way longer than I'd like to admit to realize that even though it looked like the Master Chief and his soon-to-be dead Marine pals were flying towards the ring at incredible speeds, the Autumn herself was moving so fast that it gave the illusion that they were like standing still or even going backwards. A cool shot in theory that I felt was hindered by technology at the time. Anyway, just a random tidbit there, but now we're off to the next level of the game, simply called Halo.
We're coming in too fast! Damn! Air brake failure! They blew too early! I'm losing her! Brace for impact!
As your life pod burns through the atmosphere of the alien ring world, you crash down hard into the dirt and rock. You finally come at rest on the edge of a cliff. You step out of the crash pod as the sole survivor, and what you see is one of the most iconic moments in all of the Halo franchise. With boots on the ground, you see it. Halo, in all of its glory. Impossible natural beauty on an artificial and foreign world. What is this place? That's where my mind raced, at least. I instantly thirsted for knowledge that could only be answered by pressing on, moving forward, and exploring the incredible landscapes as you search for other survivors. This level, Halo, is in my honest opinion, one of the most raw Halo experiences you can get, with an open mission structure allowing for the player to go wherever they want to and search however they felt. This, to me, is where Halo shines. Now, I know that in some circles this mission is criticized, and to each their own, but to me, this level is damn near perfect. There's an excellent combination of on-foot sections, and more importantly, vehicle sections. This here is the very first time a player is presented with the Warthog, and boy oh boy, is it a perfect playground for it. Once you get it and pass through the obvious non-natural formation and cross the light bridge, which, am I the only one that drives over the bridge like this to specifically see this cool light effect from the tires? Yeah? Well, anyway, the level really opens up after this artificial geographical construct, letting you go almost anywhere you can see. Such a cool concept, and something that I hope Halo Infinite can finally capitalize on all these years later. I really don't have anything bad to say about this level, except for maybe this one area with survivors holding out up on this hill. I mean, it's a neat terrain variance compared to the rest of the level, but I always found it kind of weird that the Forerunners would build a relay in this tiny little box canyon. It kind of feels like Bungie didn't really know what to do with this area and just kind of slapped things into it and said, good enough. But yeah, other than that, I really enjoyed this level as a kid, and I still do to this very day. There's a good chance that if I'm playing the campaign of CE these days, this level will be loaded up at some point. My score for Halo is an 8 out of 10.
The enemy has captured Captain Keyes and are holding him aboard one of their cruisers, the Truth and Reconciliation. The ship is currently holding position approximately 300 meters above the other end of this plateau.
So how do we get inside the ship if it's in the air? The Corps issued me a rifle, not wings.
There's a gravity lift that ferries troops and supplies between the ship and the surface. That's our ticket in.
The third mission in Halo Combat Evolved is the Truth and Reconciliation. And honestly, this is the first mixed bag of a level in CE for me. Before anybody gets up in arms, let me explain. When I was younger, this was actually one of my all-time favorite levels in all of the Halo franchise. Dropping in under the cover of night, sneaking ahead, and taking out enemies silently. Yes, totally silently. No one would ever know. The night sky dotted with the stars of thousands of galaxies. Feeling as if you're on the brink of space itself. The music. Oh dear God, the music here is just absolutely amazing. The first half of this level can be described as nothing but pure excellence. But then you get to the gravity lift and ascend into the Truth and Reconciliation itself. And at first, it's pretty cool. After all, this is the first look behind enemy lines in the game. And while I appreciate the attempt and novelty behind it, let's be honest, this part is almost no one's favorite section. Mostly thanks to the confusing copy-pasted hallways that go on for way longer than it should, plus the lack of many true blue human weapons. It starts to force the player to have to expand their weapon selection away from the trusted sniper and assault rifle, which in itself isn't the worst, as you feel as though you're scavenging for supplies to make it through your mission. But couple that with any difficulty higher than normal, and you're looking at a rather slow-paced progression, as you're chipping away at elites and jackals using almost entirely plasma-based weapons. Ammo is so scarce on this mission that years later, with the release of Halo CE Anniversary, they added an achievement for keeping your sniper from the beginning of the level until the very end. This level has sort of become infamous in its shortcomings. While some may argue that it makes for a greater challenge, I stand by that it starts to feel sort of like padding and almost breaks the flow of the map. Again, just to clarify, I'm strictly speaking on the second half of this level. The first half is top tier, maybe the juxtaposition between the two extremes is what makes it stand out so much in a not so great way. Plus, I mean, how the hell did Captain Keyes overhear the guards talking about Halo? Were they speaking English inside their own ship? And if so, why? Also, if they were speaking English, why the hell would they talk about that sort of information in front of their sworn enemies? That's just careless. I mean, I know Keyes already knew the name thanks to the displays on the Pillar of Autumn in the first mission, but still, just seems a bit careless if you ask me. Joking aside, the Truth and Reconciliation is both a great level and a pretty mediocre one at the same time. So my score for it is a 6 out of 10.
The Covenant believe that what they call the silent cartographer is somewhere under this island. The cartographer is a map room that will lead us to Halo's control center. The island has multiple structures and installations. One of them contains the map room.
We're approaching the LZ. It's gonna be hot. Get set to cut out quick. Touchdown. Hit it, Marine.
With lows comes highs, and man oh man, is this a high. I mean, what can I really say about the silent cartographer that hasn't been said already? From its in-your-face badass beachfront rush to its open mission design and vehicle sections, this map has proven itself time and time again over its 20+ year existence. It is a fan favorite for almost all corners of the Halo fandom. From casual players to boundary breakers to speedrunners and challenge hunters, this map has it all. If there was one map and only one map that I could choose to introduce a new player to Halo, this one would seriously contend for the top spot, with only a slim couple other levels even having a chance to compete, which we'll get to them when I review them in the future. And in fact, Bungie thought the same thing as they released specifically just this level as a demo way back around the game's release. From the music, to the sandbox nature of the level, to allowing co-op, blowing up warhogs, friendly fire, the ominous story, there was so much love for this as a demo. And of course it all translates over to the final game perfectly. The Silent Cartographer is still one of those maps, to this very day, I feel like I haven't seen everything that it has to offer. And so if I'm playing Halo CE, this is usually the map that I start with. I feel a little bad that the entry for this level is so much shorter than the others, but I mean, what else can I say? We all know this map, we all love this map. Or at least, it definitely feels that way. Be sure to let me know what you think about this level down below. I'm curious to see if anyone feels differently about this mission. My score for the Silent Cartographer shouldn't be a surprise to you at this point, but it's a 10 out of 10. I mean, if this mission isn't 10 material, what is? Part of the reason I played the Silent Cartographer so frequently was because of the mission that followed it. Assault on the Control Room is the 5th mission in the game, and is also one of my personal all-time favorites. I think these two levels might just be the best back-to-back missions in all of Halo, but I'm not positive yet. I guess we'll know for sure after I'm done reviewing all of the mainline Halo games. Now I know this level has its fair share of critics, and while I do think some of it is warranted, I still stand by my opinion that this is a fantastic level. You start off in a Pelican, ascending to an indoor balcony, littered with an enemy defense. You drop in and catch them all off guard. From there you travel through all of these interesting and unique Forerunner rooms. Just as you start to think this mission will be entirely indoor, a set of doors open, revealing snow? You've gone from a tropical island one mission prior, to now a frozen, snowy canyon. I grew up in Florida and in South Carolina, and so I was never exposed to the snow. I was a pretty simple kid, and I was fascinated by the white, fluffy, frozen water. So I always really liked snow-related levels and missions in video games. A trait that still kind of carries into my adult life, even though now I have to deal with the snow a little too much in real life, and it kind of pisses me off. But yeah, from a tropical biome to a snowing one in an instant. A startling transition to be sure, and one that took way too many years for me to understand how going underground in one biome and up into another seeming open biome of the extreme opposite. I'm still not positive, but I think this line from Cortana means that the ring is layered, essentially with each layer having its own unique weather system, with the topmost outer layer, the one that you initially landed on, being a different weather system entirely to the one that you are now on from traveling down through the ring.
Let's get moving. Bowhammer, here are coordinates and a flight plan I've worked on.
Cortana, these coordinates are underground.
The Covenant did a thorough seismic scan. My analysis shows that Halo is honeycombed with deep tunnels, which circle the whole ring.
I don't know, it's still kind of confusing to me. I mean, when I look up in Assault in the control room, I can't really tell if that's just a cloudy, snowy sky or the underside of the first layer of the ring. Maybe someone can help explain it to me. I think I understand the gist of it, but I don't think it was made all that clear, at least not in game. Anyway, back to the mission at hand. Once you cross the snowy bridges and make it down to the ground below and rejoin your fellow Marines, you once again are greeted with a warthog. As you clear the area of enemies and proceed around a bend, you see it. Just sitting there, looking all sexy and tempting you with feelings that you can no longer feel. The Scorpion tank is there, ripe for the taking. This level stands out to me so much for this one thing. I mean, it's pretty obvious once you think of it, but for some reason, it just never clicked with me. This is the only mission in Halo CE that you actually get to use the Scorpion. Kind of weird when you stop and think about it, right? 1 out of 10 missions. But yeah, I think that's why I love this level so much. Now, I totally get it. This level is pretty freaking long, and a lot of the rooms and hallways start to feel very repeated after a while. But there's still just a certain charm to this level that I love so much. Also, I don't fully remember how the last quarter of this level is supposed to be played out anymore. Ever since I discovered it as a kid, I've always stolen the Banshee right here and taken it over to the final part of the level. That's another thing. This level not only introduces you to the Scorpion, but if you know where and how, you can get early access to a Banshee, which makes for discovering some pretty cool shortcuts and Easter eggs. Assault on the Control Room isn't a perfect level by any means, but it's still one that I love nonetheless. My score for AOTCR is an 8 out of 10. From snowy cliffs to a dark, eerie swamp. As the camera follows past a group of Covenant grunts and jackals, you see them running, but from what? You aren't there yet, so something else must have spooked them. As you get out of the Pelican and set foot on the moist, slimy ground, a certain quietness sets in. Unlike previous levels where you storm the beach to triumphant music or sneak into the Covenant-filled structure to atmospheric melodies, here, it's just quiet. Other than the sound of the local alien wildlife and water, it's just still, almost thick. Already the player gets a level of uneasiness. Something feels different. As you progress, you pass by a downed friendly pelican, where you can hear static coming over the air, mixed with a distress call. You just can't quite fully make out. Further along, you encounter a few squads of grunts and jackals, but nothing too much. Resistance seems pretty light, and all the enemies that are there frequently flee and run away. Finally, you come across a Forerunner entrance deep in the swamp. leading to an elevator that takes you down, deep. Way below the surface, you navigate rooms that have seen some kind of battle. Ammo is thrown about, stacked cover, and even worse, blood. Lots of blood. A first-time player might assume it's from the Marines and Captain Keyes, who are also presumed to be traveling through these very halls. But something else lurks in the shadows. Something far more sinister. Finally, you come to a door with a code cracker left on the panel. You're close to finding your squad and rejoining them, so you think. As you enter the room and discover the corpse of a Marine, you realize something is wrong. What follows is one of my all-time favorite cinematics in Halo. The story and atmospheric tone sets the perfect stage as tensions build up and the ultimate reveal is made. Suddenly, Halo makes a major tonal shift into horror as the new enemy that was buried deep within the secrets and mysteries of Halo itself are unleashed. The Flood comes breaking through the door, and the combat and gameplay changes drastically. Now, you're on the run, as you learn a new dance to keep moving away while jumping and firing. This hellish reveal terrified me in the best way possible as a kid. It was right on the cusp of being too much for my little self to handle. It was thrilling. This was exactly the thing Halo needed, without us even knowing it. Right as you thought you saw everything the Covenant had to offer and could start confidently dispatching them with relative ease, it all gets flipped around. The Flood offers such a different experience to that of the Covenant, and it really refreshes the game experience right as it starts to become a little bit familiar. I absolutely love this level in that regard. I mean, 343 Guilty Spark has some of the best environmental storytelling in the entire game. It's just dripping in it. I really wanted to drive home just how much I respect what this level is and what it did for not only the game, but Halo as a franchise. I need you all to know that, because with all of that being said, if I'm being completely honest with you all, I really don't enjoy how this level plays all that much. I find it to be extremely confusing to navigate once you're down actually inside the Forerunner structure. I mean, I understand that it also adds to the incredible level of environmental storytelling that I was praising just a few moments ago, but I don't think what makes for good storytelling always translates into what makes for good game design and gameplay. I very rarely revisit this level upon my replays of CE, because once you know what's coming, the level does feel a little bit lacking. The first half doesn't offer much to do, as it's dedicated almost entirely to setting up the big twist and reveal of the Flood. 343 Guilty Spark is a unique and very important level that just doesn't hold up the best on replays. So my score for 343 Guilty Spark is a 6 out of 10. Lucky number 7. The famously infamous level. The most loved to hate mission. The library. This level is what separated the boys from the men. It put hair on your chest. It made your balls swell to the size of a grapefruit. A mission composed of entirely the Flood as the primary enemy, with lengthy corridors and long tunnels laid out in a confusing fashion, scattered with dead ends and massive, slow-moving elevators. The library has earned its status as the most frustrating level in all of Halo. But is it really that bad? I find personally that it really wouldn't be all that bad if it just wasn't for its ridiculous length, especially mixed with its design. Almost every other level in Halo CE promotes some sort of exploration, so it feels incredibly claustrophobic when that is just ripped away from you and you're thrown down into dark tunnels while constantly being bombarded by new and terrifying enemies. The game really does almost fully switch over to a whole new genre during this level, and it really can be a little bit off-putting. I remember as a kid absolutely despising this level. I almost never replayed it, but over the years I've kind of grown a bit of a soft spot in my heart for it. The fact that it is just so wildly different compared to almost anything else in the game is kind of cool. Bungie was willing to try something new, and I think that should be applauded, as so many times games fall victim to the shackles of repetition. So it didn't quite land the way that they were probably intending, but it's still fun that they tried. Plus, the added difficulty in this level has some of my favorite combat flow in all of Halo. The room towards the end that you get locked in, waiting for 343 Guilty Spark to unlock the door, is awesome, as you're confined to such a small space fighting so many enemies. It can be incredibly challenging, but it also feels so rewarding when you get into the right flow and are able to dance, jump, and dodge your way around the flood using the elevated sections to your advantage. As an adult, I find that I actually do kind of enjoy this level, even if I didn't quite so much as a kid. It definitely is the black sheep of the Halo CE library, that's for sure. So my score for the library is a 5 out of 10.
Which means that any organism with sufficient mass and cognitive capability is a potential vector. Is something wrong?
No, nothing.
Splendid, shall we? Oh, hello.
After getting the index to activate Halo from the library, you return to a familiar location once more. Back at the control room, right as you're about to insert the index and start the activation process, Cortana appears to give yet another twist to the game. Halo, up to this point, has been presented as a weapon to eradicate the Flood, or at least that's what Guilty Spark has led us to believe. But little did he mention that in order for the Flood to be eviscerated, they must starve to death. That's right, the only way to truly stop the Flood is to cut off its chain of food, and unfortunately for the rest of the galaxy, any living sentient being with sufficient biomass is on the menu for the Flood. Of course, we're all pretty aware of that fact these days, but when first playing this game through, it kinda dropped like a bombshell, adding back-to-back twists in a game. One twist for the game mechanics and another for the plot itself. I mean, for video game writing in 2001, this is pretty impressive, especially for a first-person shooter. Even early on, you could tell that Bungie had a grand idea and overarching storylines and plot threads. After Halo's true purpose is revealed, the Monitor betrays us. Hey, that's one betrayal right there. And then proceeds to attempt and murder the Chief. After a quick fight against some Sentinels, we go through the giant blast doors and back out into the snow. We're right back where we left off from assault on the control room. And yes, the player must backtrack through most of the map again. This time sit under the cover of night with loads of Flood taking over to fight alongside the usual Covenant foes. This level too seems to get quite a bit of hate from the community that I've noticed as well. Though it's always kind of surprised me. I get that it's literally backtrack the mission, but I do think things have been changed up enough to keep it interesting. Personally, the switch to nighttime alone is a pretty cool one, and revisiting familiar areas kind of helps connect the game a little bit to me and makes it feel almost like an open world. Now, I will admit that this map is way too long. I mean, it is easily the longest level in the entire game, and you really do start to notice it after about the first half of the mission. Halo loves the rule of 3, and never is it more apparent than in this level. But damn it, I still think it's pretty awesome how this time around you rely on the Banshee as your main means of transport, offering some pretty cool dogfight sections and high defended entranceways. I always really loved the final stretch as you're racing towards the end of the canyon to grab a Banshee, and it's just an all-out war between the Flood and the Covenant. Suddenly, you're no longer the primary focus to anyone, and seeing the fray all around you is really a pretty awesome moment in this game. Somehow being a 7-foot tall super soldier that is capable of destroying entire Covenant armadas and yet you feel small, insignificant even, as chaos unfolds around you. 2 betrayals can feel really long and repetitive, but it's still loads of fun to me, even if there really is only 1 betrayal. So my final score for this level is a 7 out of 10.
The Covenant network is absolute chaos. From what I've been able to piece together, their leadership ordered all ships to abandon Halo when they found the Flood, but they were too late. The Flood overwhelmed this cruiser and disabled it. The Covenant are terrified the Flood will repair the ship and use it to escape from Halo. They've sent in a strike team to neutralize the Flood and repair the ship for immediate departure.
This is it. We've got to rescue Captain Keyes and destroy Halo. Using Halo's handy-dandy teleportation grid that is never used again ever in any of the Halo games ever made.
There's a teleportation grid that runs throughout Halo. That's how the monitor moves about so quickly. I learned how to tap into the grid when I was in the control center. Unfortunately, each jump requires a rather consequential expenditure of energy.
We appear in another familiar spot. This time you're back inside the Covenant ship, the Truth and Reconciliation. And you guessed it, there's loads of Flood around. Luckily, the backtracking in this mission is kept to a minimal, as right as you start to think that you're about to have to go back through the way you came at the end of the 3rd mission, you come across a massive hole blown out in the ship. With no way across, you are forced to jump down and find another way back up. Now, again, I might have been a bit special as a kid, but I had no idea what this glowing green goo was supposed to be for the longest time. But after the years have passed and I started watching videos about Halo on YouTube, I learned that this is supposed to be coolant, leaking from the Truth and Reconciliation. Once I heard that, I felt kind of like a complete dumbass. Of course that's what it is. What else could it have been? And I think as a kid, for some reason, I made up in my own headcanon that it was somehow related to the Flood, and that this is what infected things or something. Again, I played this when I was like 9 years old. I'm surprised I was able to beat the game at all, especially with the giant Duke controller, let alone understand its complicated lore. But yeah, years later, it's coolant, simple as that. As you splash down in a pool of coolant and make your way out, you are greeted to some entirely new areas the player didn't get to see the first time through the mission. With that being said though, these new areas aren't particularly anything to write home for. It's mostly dark, narrow canyon walls on either side with a crazy amount of both Flood and Covenant littered across the area. On higher difficulties, this section of the mission is actually really challenging, especially since just like the first time through this level, weapons are pretty scarce, or at least any decent ones are. You can find the occasional shotgun here or there, but you'll quickly be swapping it out for anything else as ammo runs dry pretty fast. Not to mention, what weapons there are often blown halfway to hell due to the abundant amount of carrier Flood forms in this level. Once you fight your way through the extensive canyons and valleys, you find yourself battling for control over the gravity lift to get back inside the ship. Once inside is when you start to feel the backtracking nature side of this mission. Again, it does have some nice storytelling elements, like how the Flood gathered bodies in the corner of this one particular room, trying to build up enough biomass to further their infection, or even possibly start creation of a proto-gravemind. After you fight your way through most of the same rooms that you've already seen before, you then enter a room where Captain Keyes is meant to be, only to find instead a massive, disgusting pile of flesh, with Keyes' face screaming in horror right in the front. You do what any good soldier would do and punch a massive hole in your captain's face, and then take off back to the hangar to grab a Banshee and flee. Keyes is not one of my favorite levels, if I'm being honest, and if I'm being brutally honest, I'd go as far to say as it's my least favorite level in Halo CE altogether. To me, this level just feels dark and difficult and depressing. I usually go out of my way to avoid this level, as I just don't find myself ever really having much fun on it. Though I must say, in Halo CE Anniversary, this level does have the best terminal in the whole game. I still frequently look it up to watch, as it's sort of the only real idea we have of what it'd be like to succumb to the terrifying parasite known as the Flood. But yeah, other than that, I really don't think this level has much to offer besides setting up the final mission of the game. If you do like this level, please be sure to tell me why that's the case down below. Again, I'm curious about any differing opinions. This is a judgment-free discussion zone all about Halo. So, my final score for Keys is a low for the game, which is a 4 out of 10. We may have had some ups and downs over the last few levels, but man, if we aren't going to end on a high note. The Maw is the 10th and final mission in Halo CE, and again we're back to a place we've been once before. This time we are coming full circle and returning to the Pillar of Autumn. But unlike the last couple of levels, this one does not fall victim to the backtracking syndrome. Sure, you revisit one or two of the areas that you did the first time around, but one, it's been a long enough time that it feels almost nostalgic coming back, and two, it looks completely different as everything is dusty and destroyed, exposed to the desert's intense heat. It feels like a husk of its former self. The Maw really has that final level feel to it. It's as if nothing holds back, from incredible swarms of the Flood to the ultra badass Spec Ops Covenant types. Grunts wielding fuel rod cannons, multiple pairs of hunters, active camo Flood, sentinels, you name it, it's here. The first half of the Maw plays similarly to the Pillar of Autumn, except cranked to 11 as I mentioned before. In fact, I think this level probably holds the hardest section in the game for me. I beat this game on normal for the footage in this review, but on heroic or legendary, this part right here to me is extremely challenging. I swear it feels like the Flood just come through here endlessly, to the point where I feel like I have to push forward through them just to get them to stop coming. I'm still not sure if the Flood really is on infinite respawn here or not, but it certainly can feel that way with some of the playthroughs. So once you make your way to the armory, or not, and go into the reactor room to destroy the 4 pylons to detonate the Pillar of Autumn, you then escape up through an elevator to get to the vehicle bay, and what follows is now one of the most iconic moments in all of gaming. The birth of the famous Warthog Run. With just a few minutes on the clock before everything is blown to dust, you must drive through nearly the entire length of the Pillar of Autumn that is being consumed by the Flood. With the Halo theme blasting and the engine roaring, you embark on an incredible chase through the ship, dodging Flood, Covenant, Sentinels, even dropships. Everything is burning and blowing. The Covenant are both fighting for their lives and fleeing for them simultaneously. The Flood is just hungering for all, and the Master Chief is practicing his sick Tokyo drifts. After witnessing the saddest death in all of Halo, rest in peace Foehammer, you always delivered. You make it to the end, run one last stretch on foot in an almost gauntlet-type fashion, reach a longsword, and boom, you get the hell out of there. This was such an awesome way to end the game, leaning hard into the vehicle side of Halo and cementing it forever in the history books. This set the standard on how to end a Halo game. It's just a shame that only a couple other games in the series were ever really able to pull it off again in one way or another. The Maw is the ultimate climax and ending to a story as epic as Halo CE. It left an impact that stayed with me to this very day, and as it stands, is still my favorite ending to any other Halo game. We'll see if that too remains the same after all this is said and done. So my score for the Maw is a 10 out of 10. I really don't see how this mission could have been any better. The first half of the level is intense, boots on the ground combat, and the second is pure, unadulterated vehicular awesomeness. With all that being said, we have officially reviewed every campaign level in Halo CE. All that is left to do is to add up each level's score, and whatever that number is will be the overall score for my review of Halo Combat Evolved. So let me add them up real quick. Let's see, drum roll please. Halo Combat Evolved gets a 71. So there we go, we have our first score. Next on the chopping block will be Halo 2, but I do want to say, making this video took quite a bit of time, from capturing the footage I needed to writing the script, recording the audio, and editing the video. It takes a good while. Between working and my personal life, finding the time can be a little difficult to be able to work on this sort of thing. However, with that being said, I will do my absolute best to make sure the next review comes out in a semi-timely manner. Of course, your support also helps like no other, so please be sure to click that like button and bell icon and subscribe to stay up to date with my latest videos. Also, make sure to leave a comment down below, as engagement really helps long-form videos like this one do well within the YouTube algorithm. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time when we review every level of Halo 2. Like I said, right now Halo 2 is my favorite Halo game, but we'll see if that stands true after we review them all and compare their numbers. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.